right, welcome back from lunch. Hope you're digesting. Thank you both for being here. So it's 2025. Solana Network launched totally in early 2020, and later that same year, Circle launched its first USDC on Solana. I was wondering if you could both kind of take us down memory lane a little bit. Like, Anatoly, from your perspective, what was the importance of having the support of Circle and the launch of our first stablecoin to sort of Solana's early success?
Yeah, I remember talking to their team from my 800 square foot apartment. I was literally on top of the dishwasher with a laptop, showing them this program we called Break, where you can smash your keys and you can show how a transaction gets confirmed in like 1.2 seconds. And the fees were like, sub 1 penny. And at that time, Ethereum fees were, in dollars, and transactions were taking, minutes to confirm, going through the mempool and everything else. So it was pretty fun. It was very humble beginnings, and I was really excited about USDC because I think having an asset that is extremely low risk in a digital platform, in a smart contract platform, is what allows developers and applications and protocols and everything else to take more risk and to actually, for finance to work and all these things to actually happen that we want to happen in digital platforms. So it's a critical component, and there's no way to build it without something like Circle.
Yeah, I mean, I remember very well, obviously, our vision was always that over time, that with a dollar digital currency on blockchains, that the kind of marginal cost of storing and moving value would go to zero. And that was like a founding vision of the company. And we were always really, trying to find the technology that would basically let a protocol for dollars on the internet work for any scale of kind of payment transaction from, literally, and I think we talked about machine-to-machine payments. Now AI agents are doing that today, but from like the smallest streaming payment that could be a fraction of a cent to multi-billion-dollar capital markets transactions that are happening where capital efficiency and speed and latency are super important. And so Solana, as a sort of next-generation blockchain at the time, was super compelling from that perspective. And I think we were watching as many of the DeFi primitives were starting to come into the ecosystem, and it was like very clear like this was going to be an extraordinary user experience, amazing for developers, and could actually fulfill what we wanted. And I think actually a lot of our early conversations were about, basically like, could you actually replicate capital markets on chain, and what were the building blocks to do that? And I mean, that's what brought us together to execute together.
Yeah, it only took 5 years to, I think, get 80% of the way there.
Getting there, totally.
Yeah, so we're 5 years in. Obviously, Solana has grown a lot. Circle has grown a lot. We're seeing like record levels of stable coins minted on Solana. We're seeing record levels of transactions and payments and remittances and DeFi. So where in your mind are we at in the mainstream adoption moment, and what else needs to get done? Is it, well,
yeah, sure. I mean, I'll take a crack. I mean, we've said for a long time we need basically infrastructure that can support like the scale that's needed for mainstream applications, and I think we're basically like we're almost there. I mean, it depends on what scale you're looking for, but we can now build mainstream applications on infrastructure like Solana that works for hundreds of millions of users for different kinds of applications. So there's that. I think the second is like the user experience. And we do live in a multi-chain world, and we do live in a world where gas fees are complicated and wallet infrastructure can be hard. But I think we're now seeing these abstractions that basically allow people to deliver UXs where you can instantiate an experience, you can have kind of sponsored gas, and you can kind of use cross-chain primitives that exist now as well to like take away a lot of that complexity for users. So the UX, I think we're almost there. I sort of think about like, will there be apps that can have like 1 billion users that support stablecoin native UX, and I think now we probably can. And then legal certainty, which was, I think probably one of the biggest unlocks, right? So having this new, stablecoin money as a fully reserved money, that's a new portion of what we think of as M1 money that is actually legally recognized in the global financial system, and that basically financial firms, companies, public companies, households will be able to utilize. When we have that, then I think this can scale pretty massively into the the enormous TAM of electronic money, which is over 90 trillion globally. And that, the Genius Act in the United States, is on its way to passage, and I think is going to be the federal law, and that's a huge, huge unlock for everyone here. I think for basically on-chain money becoming the best money in the world.
And totally, same question to you. We've seen all this growth, all this adoption. We're starting to see regulatory movement, as Jeremy mentioned. What else needs to get done to continue sort of realizing the vision? When you and I talk, we often talk about the blockchain, the tech, and IBRL always making Solana the network faster, particularly with so many new entrants, both in the blockchain space and also new entrants in the stablecoin space. How do you feel like, what needs to happen for Solana to continue to lead and to differentiate itself?
I think so. I think the purpose of blockchains is, or why they're successful, is that they remove risk. They actually make finance less risky. Bitcoin provides really robust settlement guarantees everywhere in the world. Ethereum smart contracts gave you verifiability, so you can actually examine what the code is doing. You can analyze it, and how the money that you're moving through, how it's treated by the risk engine in a lending protocol or something like that. So that transparency eliminates risk. We were able to combine both of those things and also add speed and cost by expanding the bandwidth, the amount of information that the network can process and handle. That also eliminates risk for finance, because if you're a market maker, a trader, and you have variability of how long transactions take or how much they cost, you now have risk when you're dealing with markets that are live, and you have positions at risk and things like that. So this is, again, like, I somehow got really lucky as an engineer that I get to work on a fundamental physics problem, and every time we get an improvement, it actually expands, makes the product better, expands how much stuff you can do on the network and the kind of finance and financial applications you can build. So it's not just, it's now easy to pay for coffee with USDC. That's maybe like a low-risk transaction that a person does, and they don't really think about the risks involved of sending that $5, whether that $5 is real, is it actually in a bank. All that stuff doesn't really matter for that point-to-point coffee transaction, but those risks, if they exist, they start adding up, and then you can't have $10 billion that are flowing through finance in a single state machine. It's the elimination of that risk is what actually allows you to expand the capacity for finance. And that's really cool. This was something that when I started Solana, I just didn't understand at all. I came to it as an engineer, just looking at messages and speed and latency and how do we get these bits across from point A to point B.
So with the remaining time, let's sort of look a little bit into the future, right? Where we've come from, where we are. We are using this phrase a lot, hearing this phrase a lot, particularly in Solana circles these days, of internet capital markets, or the on-chain economy, the financialization of everything, right? A lot of grand-sounding phrases. I'm curious, what does this idea of internet capital markets and on-chain economy mean to you? I'll start with you, Jeremy. And what does this look like in 5 years or 10 years? And what is the role that Circle and stablecoins have to play?
I think about this all the time. And when we first started talking, and we did some earlier podcasts, this is all we talked about. And I think, from my perspective, what we want to do is we want to basically take the core primitives, the most base primitives, kind of the closest thing possible to government obligation money, like cash and treasuries, and basically express those as like building block layers. So we have kind of real money issuance. We want to make sure that you have kind of internet capital markets basically create a way to have kind of real-time convertibility between anything to anything, really. And so we're starting to build, effectively fungible in-kind create redeem between yield-bearing collateral and cash with USYC and USDC, and that's a really important next kind of layer. And then I think from my perspective, there's obviously like investing in ownership in things, in property, whether that's equity or other things. I'm personally extremely interested in what I'll kind of call endogenous capital markets. So capital markets that are developed that are endogenous to the on-chain economy. And so the more that stablecoin money is used for working capital, the more that stablecoin money and yield-bearing collateral is used on-chain, the more that you can form credit natively on that. And so I think about like, what does the world look like where you have internet scale credit markets that maybe look, feel, behave more like AdWords as a marketplace platform, but something that can deliver credit. And that's, for me, that's probably one of the most exciting things in the future for internet capital markets.
Got it. Totally. What's your vision? What are your thoughts on this?
My kind of North Star litmus test for this is, can like a founder do the Linux from scratch version of an IPO where the public markets that they want to create for their equity are smart contracts that are immutable. It's a public permissionless chain. It is effectively like all the intermediaries that you have with an IPO are software that's immutable, that's transparent, and a founder should be able to just run it, after submitting a form or whatever disclosures that they need to, without any costs and really any friction. So I think we can get there, and that will dramatically reduce process fees. Like all the stuff that kind of gunks up the works of innovation is like, takes 18 months to do this, and you gotta have all of this paperwork, and then all these intermediaries that are now legally have to be in all these spots can then take a fee, and the fees grow and grow and grow, and it's like what, $25 million to do an IPO, which means fewer companies go public. There's less public actually participating in where value creation is happening. And that overall creates a worse economy. I think has really long-term detrimental effects. So where I think where we can really be very disruptive is just giving founders the tools to do this on their own.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your time, for your insights. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody else.